Hi guys, today we're going to learn about cladograms, how to read them and how to draw them. So you should have already grabbed this packet off of Schoology and put it into the note section of Notability. We're going to be reading, highlighting. I'm going to do a couple of problems with you and then you're going to finish the rest on your own. All right, so part one, reading a cladogram. A cladogram, highlight this, shows the evolutionary relationship between animals or plants, really any living thing. The relationships are established by the presence or absence of evolutionary traits known as derived characteristics. That's an important term, you gotta know that. Using the cladogram, fill in the table below with a plus to show the trait is present in the organism and a minus to show that the trait is not present. So notice we've got this diagram here, all right? You kind of read this going that way. Okay, so we're starting down here at some point in time with some ancestral organism, and the first branch we have here, the lancelet, has evolved. Okay, after the last lancelet evolves, we've got the appearance of a vertebral column. All right, and then we've got lampreys branching, and then we've got jaw bones, and then we've got groupers branching off. Okay, so these traits here, these are our derived traits. Okay, you're going to list those here in this data table. All right, so if we look at the lancelet branches off before any of those show up. So lancelets don't have any of these things. They don't have vertebral columns, which is a fancy way of saying a spinal cord, jaw bones, four-legged locomotion, which means they move with four legs, amniotic eggs, right? They don't have eggs that have an amniotic sac, and they don't have hair. All right, lampreys, notice how they do branch off after the appearance of vertebral columns. So they do have a vertebral column. They do not have any of the other derived traits because those traits evolved after they did. Okay, groupers. All right, if we look at this diagram, all right, notice here we've got the grouper. We're going this way. So groupers have vertebral columns, they have jaw bones, but they do not have any of the other things. Okay, so hopefully you're kind of picking up on the trend here. Salamanders have spines, jaw bones. They move with four legs, but they do not have amniotic eggs or hair. Turtles don't have hair, and wolves have it all. Okay, because they are the last organism, as we read this cladogram, to evolve. Okay. All right, number one says, an organism in a cladogram that has none of the derived traits is known as an outgroup. You got to know this word, outgroup. What is the outgroup in the cladogram above? Well, the only organism that has none of these traits, right, would be the lancelet. So that's our answer here. What traits do groupers and turtles have in common? So you can look either at the cladogram or you can look at your chart. All right, so we've got groupers here, which is kind of fish, and we've got turtles over here. What do they have in common? They got two things, right? Vertebral columns or spinal cords and jaw bones. So I'll fill that into number 2. And jaw bones. All right, get your highlighter ready. Number 3, the place where two lines meet in a cladogram is called a node, which represents a common ancestor. Node, got to know that word. All right, so for example, right here, where these two lines meet, there's a common ancestor. Here's a common ancestor. Here's a common ancestor. Okay, so those are the nodes that they talk about. For example, the common ancestor of turtles and groupers had jaw bones and a vertebral column. Based on this, what traits did the common ancestor of turtles and wolves have? So if we look at turtles and wolves, right, they have a common ancestor up here. So they basically have everything except for hair. All right, so we're going to write that in there. Everything, all of those derived traits listed, except hair. Okay. What traits did the common ancestor of wolves and lampreys have? So if we look at wolves and lampreys, all right, really the only thing that they have in common, right, you can look here at this chart as well, the only thing that they have in common is the fact that they both have a spinal cord, a vertebral column. Okay, number 5 says the more derived traits and organisms have in common, the more closely related they are. That makes sense. Based on the table in the cladogram, circle the pairing that is most closely related. All right, we've got turtles and wolves over here, or wolves and lampreys. All right, notice when we compare the two, wolves and turtles are much more similar. They have more pluses over here in this chart. They are closer together on the cladogram, all right? So wolves and turtles are going to be more closely related, okay? So that's kind of how you read a cladogram. Hopefully this is making sense so far. Let's take a look at part 2, how a cladogram is developed. All right, it says, examine the data table, Venn diagram, and cladogram below. Notice how the information from the data table is incorporated into the Venn diagram. So they've basically taken this information and they've used it to make a Venn diagram. All right, and then they've used the Venn diagram to create the cladogram. Okay. Now examine how the data from the Venn diagram is used to make the cladogram. All right. So essentially, they've done an extra step here with this Venn diagram. You aren't going to need to make a Venn diagram. What you really need to know is how to read this cladogram, okay? It was very similar to what we did on the first page. Sorry for all the bells in the background. Number 6, what is the outgroup in the plant cladogram above? All right, so now this one's kind of different. We're kind of reading this way, okay? So if we look at this, notice we've got a few derived traits. We've got vascular tissue, we've got seeds, and we've got flowers. But branching off before any of those traits is moss. Moss must be our outgroup. It does not have any of those traits. Number 7, if you discovered a plant with seeds and vascular tissue, but no flowers, which plant from the cladogram would it be most closely related to? All right, so seeds and vascular tissue, but no flowers. Okay, so if we look up here at the chart, right, the white pine is the closest. It has seeds and vascular tissue, but no flowers. Okay, same thing down here. If we go this way, what has seeds and vascular tissue, but no flowers? Okay, the white pine. Number 8, why isn't the sensitive fern classified with the rose? How are they different? Okay, the fern, if you take a look at the fern up here, all right, doesn't have seeds or flowers, versus the rose has all of the derived traits. All right, so we're going to write that in here. Fern doesn't have seeds or flowers. Number 9, what derived trait is shared by the most plants? Okay, the most plants, if we read this cladogram, right, are going to have vascular tissue because that evolved. Remember, we're reading in this direction, kind of time is going this way. So vascular tissue is the first major derived trait that evolved based on this cladogram. You can also look up here at the chart, right, and pretty much all the organisms, right, have vascular tissue. Remember, moss is that outgroup, so it doesn't have any of the derived traits. So we're going to write vascular tissue, okay? And vascular tissue is just referring to structures that will move around nutrients and water within a plant. Number 10, what traits do the white pine and the sensitive fern both have? Well, the white pine and the sensitive fern both have vascular tissue, which we can see down here as well, right? So again, we're going to write in vascular tissue. Okay, so those are just some example problems that I wanted to do with you, because now you're going to do some stuff on your own. All right, so you're going to make a cladogram here. All right, so it says using the data table. You actually do not need to make a Venn diagram. It's optional. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to. All right, you're going to fill in the data table, and then you're going to create a cladogram using that data table, okay? Couple of things that I want to point out here that are a little bit tricky. So here are the derived traits you're going to be using. Lack of a tail, all right? Lack of a tail, right, means that that organism has no tail. Okay, limbs, make sure you make a note. Fins are not limbs. So arms and legs are limbs. All right, and then hair and then lungs. Okay, so let's go across here. Let's do the lack of the tail one together, just kind of have an example. All right, so gorillas have no tail. They lack a tail, so you're going to put a plus here. It's kind of weird because you're like thinking about a negative thing, right? Gorillas have no tail, so they get a plus. Okay. Lungfish do have a tail, so they get a minus because we're looking for lack of a tail. Cats do not lack a tail because they have a tail. Humans lack a tail, so you're going to have a plus. Turtles do not lack a tail because they have one, as do trout. Okay, so that one's a tricky one, so I wanted to do that one with you because it was a negative, right? Lack of a tail, no tail. All right, make sure you notice here that this trout, normal fish have gills. So you should be able to figure out the limbs, the hair, and the lungs, all right, based on this information here. Okay, so then you're just going to go straight across, right? Gorillas are going to have limbs. Lungfish don't have limbs, right? Fins are not limbs, so you're going to put a minus. So you're going to keep going across, filling in pluses and minuses. Pluses if they have it, minuses if they don't. Then you're going to use that information to make a cladogram. So feel free to look back at the second and first page that we just went through together to draw out that cladogram. Okay, from there, then you're going to answer questions 11, 12, and 13. Okay. On the last page, you are going to use the cladogram given to you, all right, and you are going to answer questions 14 through 20, okay, using the cladogram at the top of the page, okay? This is due in class, so make sure you get this done and submitted, and we will talk about it next class. Thanks, guys.